All right, greetings and salutations. Welcome to episode 1 of the Xtreme Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Todd Tubbs, and we are here today to go over an integrated IDP mock draft. Now, if you followed the mock drafts on this channel already, you'll realize that this is a different league than the first 2 mock drafts. They are sister leagues with the same format. This podcast is meant to serve one specific league and the 12 owners who are in that league. If you are someone outside of our league and you happen to find this podcast, I hope you can find something useful to take away from it. It is a 1 quarterback, full point PPR, deep IDP league, and we are in our 9th year. I'm going to go ahead and bring in today's guest, Fabian Villarreal, aka Kyle Orton's drinking buddies. How are you today, Fabian?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Todd.
Awesome. It's good to have you here. I'm excited to get into your 2-round rookie mock draft. But before we do, you've been in this league since the inception of this league. You
Correct.
have 1 division title, 1 first place finish, and 2 fourth place finishes with an overall record of 70, 67, 3. What is your favorite thing about this league?
Well, for me, the favorite thing about this league is being able to draft a player, and the fact that it's a dynasty. It's the only dynasty league I do. I feel like a GM, right? So I get to pick a player, keep them as long as I want, or trade them away if I feel like I want to dump them. But that sense of ownership, I think, when you really, feel like a player is going to be special, and you go and reach and maybe take them a little higher than you maybe otherwise should have, because you feel like, I don't want to miss this shot of taking this player. That's kind of a really cool aspect of this league.
Right. And in all fairness, you did land Justin Jefferson last year.
Yep. And I would have taken him as the first receiver off the board last year. That I just kind of felt strongly about him last year. So
Right. Now, before we get into your mock draft, just full disclosure, I do have the first 5 picks in this draft. And if you're someone who has the first 5 picks in your draft, you're an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
you
an
said
asshole.
it, not me.
Yes. Now, with that said, we're going to get into your mock draft here, and we're going to start with the 1.01. And who do you have for me at the 1.01?
All right, at 1.01, really, it's really a toss-up in any order here. But the way I approached it is, I ranked the players as I would have seen them in the order of value for those top 5 picks.
Right.
So first guy that I got is Najee Harris. At the end of the day, no surprise here, I'm going to give you another running back. So it's really a toss-up between Najee and Travis Etienne.
Right.
But I'm going Najee Harris here. He's going into a pretty high-powered offense in Pittsburgh, one where you saw a guy like Le'Veon Bell really succeed in the past. You've seen a bunch of other running backs do really well in that system. So he seems like a pretty solid pick there at number 1.
Right. And, per Dynasty League Football's current May ADP, the June ADP is not out yet, so we only have May to go off of. Najee Harris is the 1.01. So, with me having the first 5 picks, it really doesn't matter, I guess, what order I take those 5 players in.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're ranking them, by value, Najee Harris is the 1.01. Maybe you could kind of have a coin flip there with Jamar Chase, who I think we're going to get into real soon here.
Yep.
Now, one note on Najee Harris, and if you've already seen episode 2 of the Mega Awesome Dynasty Mock Draft, you're going to recognize this little stat. But Najee Harris has the most missed tackles forced on receptions by running backs with 22. The next closest is 13. And that's pretty impressive. So he is elusive in space. He is going to make you miss, right? That's what he does.
Yep.
All right. What do you have in store for the 1.02?
All right, 1.02. I got the top receiver in Jamar Chase. So I'm giving you top running back and top receiver here, one and two respectively here. Jamar Chase, some people have said that he might even be better than Justin Jefferson, or when he was grading out when both of them were on LSU together. You get a lot of experts that say Jamar Chase was better than Justin Jefferson. I don't know if I believe that. If I'm looking at them both, I don't know that I would put him ahead of Justin Jefferson. Also, we've already seen what Justin Jefferson can do after 1 year in the league. But I still think Jamar Chase, he's got good size. He's coming out of a really good system. You really can't go wrong with him at number 2 there.
Now, if Jamar Chase had come out last year and we did not already know what Justin Jefferson was capable of doing, so no hindsight here, right? They're coming out at the same time. Who would you rather have, Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson?
That's a tough question. I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to go backwards and try to figure out like would I still have gone Jefferson or Chase. It's entirely possible without having that book of work in the NFL that I may have chosen Jamar Chase. But I don't know. I guess that's a really good question. I can't say for sure that I would have taken Jefferson over Chase.
Right.
I do think that they're both right there in terms of talent. So
that's fair. One thing I will note about Jamar Chase is 48% of his career catches have went for 15 plus yards. That's the highest in this draft class. That's nearly half of his career receptions have gone for over 15 yards.
Yeah, crazy.
That's pretty impressive. Let's get on to the 1.03. Again, I haven't been saying teams because this has just all been me for the first 3 picks. Team Crows. And at the 1.03, you have.
I've got Travis Etienne. So, some people say he's right up there in terms of the top running back. I think you landing both of them makes sense. That way, if one ends up being better than the other, you're covered there. Those are generally the consensus top running backs. Coming out of a system in Clemson that utilized them a lot, especially pass catching. They're looking to turn things around there in Jacksonville. He's going to be given a chance to run with it and be the lead back and the bell cow in that system. So at least I feel like that's going to be the case, and so I think he makes a lot of sense there at 1.03.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, before the NFL draft, Travis Etienne was my RB1 in this draft class. In my system that I use, my analytics system that I use, Travis Etienne grades out at 8 out of 8 markers. Very few running backs have actually done that since like 2001. There's been, I think, 9 running backs total that have actually hit 8 out of 8, and he hits that 8 out of 8 mark. Now we don't have Najee Harris's full analytics because he chose not to participate in his pro day. But even had he participated in his pro day, and even had he hit on his 40-yard dash, he still only would have hit 7 out of 8, which that's still not bad because you got guys like Saquon and CMC who only hit on 7 out of 8, and 7 out of 8 is still fantastic. But Etienne was my RB1 prior to this draft class.
Yeah.
Prior to the draft. I might actually have to give the nudge to Najee Harris now because even though Etienne is my favorite college running back and he's going to my favorite team, I'm a Jaguars fan. I did not like it. I did not like the move. I do not like the landing spot for him. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. The thing with Travis Etienne, And I don't, maybe Urban Meyer's going to use him as a wide receiver. Maybe he's not. I don't really believe that he is,
I
but
doubt it. I really doubt it.
I don't really believe that he is, but I think we could see him as that, Alvin Kamara-ish receiving running back out of the backfield, right? Um, Travis Etienne in 2020 had the second most receiving yards after the catch in the draft class with 646 receiving yards after the catch. That's second behind only wide receiver Devontae Smith in the draft class, who had 953 yards after the catch. That means Travis Etienne had more yards after the catch than every other wide receiver in this draft class, not named Devontae Smith. So that's pretty impressive. And
Yeah.
speaking of Devontae Smith, not to bury the lead here, who is your 1.04?
Well, you called it. Devontae Smith is my 1.04 here. For me, it's Jamar Chase 1A and Devontae Smith 1B. And I would actually not be surprised if in 3 to 5 years, Devontae Smith actually ends up being better than Jamar Chase. That's how much I like Devontae Smith. I actually watched some film on him, and his route running is so precise that when he gets downfield, he always seems to have at least 2 or 3 yards separation from the corners. He's getting behind the corners consistently. Incredible hands. Gets after the ball. And he made, so between him and Waddle, but I think even more so it was Devontae Smith, he made Mac Jones look like a really good quarterback. And quite frankly, I hate Mac Jones. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I think he is a product of a system. I think he's going to fail in New England. I think he's a bust. He put together a really solid year as a quarterback only because he had some incredibly talented playmakers around him, and namely in Devontae Smith.
Right.
Devontae Smith is going to Miami, where he played with Tua.
Actually, Philadelphia.
I'm sorry, Philadelphia.
With Jalen Hurts, yes.
That's Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle went to Miami, right? That's right. No, so Devontae Smith, yeah, I mean, just, I look at him and I just am amazed by just how good he looks out there. It's really, really amazing.
Well, he didn't win the Heisman for nothing. First wide receiver to do that in a very long time. And it should be no surprise that per PFF, Devontae Smith is the highest graded SEC wide receiver in the playoff era. So would it be a mistake, in your opinion, if Devontae Smith was not in my plans in the top 5?
Yeah, if I were you, again, I feel pretty strongly about Jamar Chase, but I also feel just as strongly as about Devontae. If I was in your position, looking to solidify my wide receiver and running back core, these are the 4 guys that I would pick, just me personally. Now,
right.
The thing about the mock is I don't necessarily know if this is the path that you're going to go. But I guess for me, like how I'm looking at it is I look at it for need. I look at where there's a need, and then I look at the players that I would pick in this case.
Right.
Now, I don't think you've mentioned it, but I have no picks in the first 2 rounds, and this is the first time I haven't had a pick in either the first or second round since we started this league.
Right.
So normally, if I'm doing a mock draft like this, and let's say I was coming up on 1.6, I might not be as forthcoming with how strongly I feel about a guy like Devontae Smith, maybe with the hopes that maybe he would fall to me there at like 1.06, right? Because that's where I picked last year.
Yeah.
But in this case, I have no qualms being as upfront and honest of my evaluation of these players, because quite frankly, I don't expect any of these guys to be available for me when I pick in the 3rd round. So
right. And I actually have to be a little guarded with my opinion on some of these guys, because I do have, all of these picks. And once I think we do the episode, the draft recap episode, where we actually talk about who was actually taken at each spot, that's when I can actually start to be honest about some of these player valuations, right? And the way I think about some of these guys. So, how about the 1.05?
So 1.05, just knowing how much you're a Jaguars fan, we got a guy in Trevor Lawrence who is regarded as one of the best quarterback prospects since Andrew Luck to come out of the draft. I kind of feel like it's going to be hard for you to pass up on a guy like Trevor Lawrence if he's there and you're in rebuild mode. Why wouldn't you want to pick a guy who is not only touted as the top quarterback, but a guy that you can have on your team, like we talked about in the beginning of this podcast, a guy that you can have on your team for 10 to 15 years, potentially, maybe even more.
Right.
Kind of hard to pass on that, right?
Yeah, especially if he is, the next Andrew Luck, the next Peyton Manning. Now, I should mention, for all of those viewers out there that are screaming at their computer screen right now, that this is a one quarterback league and a quarterback should never go at the 1.05. We've never actually had a quarterback in this league go higher than the 112. The only quarterback to ever go in the first round in the history of this league was Jameis Winston at the 112. And that was only because the owner who drafted him was a Florida State fan. It's the only reason we've ever had a quarterback go in the first round. So, if you're someone out there who doesn't think a quarterback should go in the first round of a one quarterback league, I hear you. But Trevor Lawrence is different. I don't know he's going to go in the top 5, but I could definitely see him going in the first round of this draft this year. All right, let's move on to the 1.06. This is the first pick that is not me, and it's Cactus Jack, and he actually got this pick from you.
Yeah,
so
trade it away. So I mean, this could easily be one of the other remaining running backs here, but I feel like you got a guy here in Kyle Pitts who is touted as one of the best tight end prospects to come out in a very long time. Just through the roof with all of his athleticism and the statistics and how he tested. Has really good production in the field. If you're trading up here and knowing that you're going to be taking the top running backs and wide receivers, it might make sense here to grab a guy like Kyle Pitts and get a stud at the tight end position where you can kind of set it and forget it for a long time.
Right. And he has, the best yards per completion, or not per completion, per catch of all college tight ends ever with at least 40 receptions. Best yards per catch of all college tight ends ever with at least 40 receptions. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
How about the 1.07? We're moving on to Matt Ron daddy issues.
Yeah. So in this case, because we've been in the league since the beginning, we know that Matt Ron covets running backs and receivers in the first round. I believe he actually took a couple of receivers the last couple rounds and last couple years in the first round. Looking at, even though he's a guy who always has a ton of running backs, I think he takes Javonte Williams here for his pass catching abilities. This is the kind of guy that fits the owner, so I'm matching him up with the owner. Matt Ron kind of covets these guys that are really good pass catching running backs, and I think that from my perspective, this guy is a number 3 running back. Could potentially go a little higher than 1.07 here, but if he's falling to daddy issues here, I think that he doesn't pass up on him.
Yeah, I agree. We know that's how Matt likes to build his roster out. I was hoping that real fast I could find the Xtreme draft profile. Here we go. Let's see if I can open this up real quick. in the first round in the history of the league. Even though we know he likes to build through running backs, he has had 9 first-round picks in the history of the league. He's taken a running back only 3 times and a wide receiver 6 times. But I think that's kind of because his running backs were so strong for a while that he's been really trying to kind of bolster that wide receiver room of his. And I think he's going to go back to running back if he has that opportunity.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
And speaking of Javonte Williams, he has the highest career missed tackle rate of all running backs in this draft class. So another guy who just makes people miss.
Yeah, very elusive.
Now the 1.08 is Das Raiderhawk. And
yeah, so here I've got Das taking Jalen Waddle. I think Das will be surprised that he slid here, especially since I've got you taking Devontae Smith at 1.04. Also, with you taking the quarterback in Lawrence, created a little bit of a slide here for Waddle. I still think he is a good receiver. I just don't think he's as good as Devontae. I still think he will be very successful, and so Das just can't pass up on a guy like Jalen Waddle here.
Yeah, and I agree. And I have been kind of forgetting to mention some of these other players that, what their May ADPs have been, but Jalen Waddle's May ADP per Dynasty League Football is the 1.07. So getting him at the 1.08 is, some good value there. He is the number 1 highest graded slot wide receiver in his over his career in this draft class. Like you said, pairing him back with Tua, I think that's just going to be, a good situation for Jalen Waddle to be in. I'm not sure he could have had a better landing spot for him. So now we're going to get interesting, and this is going to be the first IDP off the board.
Yep.
And so at the 1.09, which is our newest owner, who do you have for him at the 1.09?
1.09, I've got Jamin Davis, linebacker out of Washington. If you look at our league historically, the back end of round 1 is where you start seeing the top tier linebackers go, especially since if there's a run on running backs and wide receivers, kind of feels good to take the top IDP guy off the board at the end of round 1, which I think is what's going to happen here.
I'm probably guilty of starting that trend, but yes.
Yeah. I think in my view, because there's 4 linebackers and 4 wide receivers, I put a lot of value in both of those positions. I've drafted my share of linebackers in the first round, especially if it's a guy that I really like. I've had some misses at the linebacker position in round 1, but I've had a couple hits too. So I've been pretty happy with that.
Yeah,
but if you're going to get a guy like a top tier guy, you kind of have to start going after him at the end of round 1, in my opinion.
Right. So for those of you watching who are not in this league and are wondering, we do start 4 linebackers. And because of that, their value is kind of increased a little bit due to having to start 4. Now, what was your justification for going Jamin Davis over Micah Parsons here?
Yeah, so I think Jamin Davis is going to go into a system that, one, I think he'll start right away. I'm not so sure if Parsons will start right away, but I think in Washington, I think he will. That defense has cranked out some linebackers with a ton of fantasy points in the past. I think it lends itself to get a guy who will rack up a ton of tackles. So for me, I think talent wise, he's right there with Parsons. I just think that there's going to be a potential for him to get on the field sooner and then also to be consistently on the field for a good chunk of the game.
Right. Now, per Dynasty League football, we do not have ADP for defensive players, but we do have defensive rankings. And really, it's just the opinion of like 5 of their experts who rank the linebackers in the order that they like them. And Jamin Davis is currently the linebacker 1 on that list. Now, pre-draft, it was Micah Parsons. It's been Micah Parsons for a long time. I've got a quote here from John Macri of Pro Football Focus, PFF, and this is what he has to say about Micah Parsons. He says, "Don't overthink it. If you want the best IDP in this class for the long term, then draft Micah Parsons over all other IDPs." And the other thing I should mention is Micah Parsons has a 94.8 run defense grade in 2019, which was the last time we saw him on the field. That's the highest ever recorded by a college linebacker per PFF. So I agree. I like Jamin Davis. I like him quite a bit. I think he's going to be a tackle machine in Washington. I still don't know if I'm taking him over Micah Parsons, but speaking of, that, let's talk about the 110 to the Iowa Patriots. One of our newest owners last year. And what do you have for Iowa Patriots?
Yeah, so I've got JLM starting the run on linebacker. So I got Micah Parsons going the very next pick at 110 to Iowa Patriots. If these were flipped, if it went Parsons and Davis in that order, I think that would be fine.
Right.
That's how close I have them. I've got them going in consecutive picks here.
Right.
Again, these are 2 top tier linebackers that are going to get you a lot of points. And so I think that these are the 2 guys that are worthy of going in round 1 before you start seeing a couple more going in the second round.
Now, I'm somebody who loves my IDPs. I'm not sure that any of these guys should be going in round 1 this year. And these 2 teams, they do need linebackers. JLM needs linebackers badly. Iowa Patriots needs linebackers badly. I like the offensive talent in the first round. I would maybe start the IDP run at 2-1, but I can't fault them for taking linebackers here. If that's the way it falls and they go linebacker at 9 and 10, I can't fault them for that. So let's talk about the 111.
Yeah, so 111. So I looked at Sandusky's team. There's really not a lot of holes there, not a lot of positions of need. So when I looked at it, I thought, hey, why not grab one of the top wide receivers? So I've got him taking Rashad Bateman. I think that a lot of people had him ranked pretty highly in this draft. Probably didn't end up going to the best team. I think he went to Baltimore, right?
Yeah, landing spot definitely killed his value. I was pretty upset about that during the draft. I actually flipped my chair when that pick happened. I was not happy. Cut the back of my leg doing so. But hey, he's got Lamar Jackson, right? So pairing Rashad Bateman with Lamar Jackson would be a nice little stack there for him, if that's the route that he went.
Yeah, I think he could easily be the number 1 guy there.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that a guy like a Marquise Brown is the number 1 guy there. I think maybe not in year 1, but I think by year 2 that Bateman is the number 1 guy there.
Right. All right, so let's finish out round 1 with Kicker Liker, who is a big fan of kickers. Did you give him a kicker?
I waited until a later round to give him a kicker.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
Even though his name would insinuate that he might take one here, but
Right.
I I've got I looked at his team and I see a need at quarterback. And when I look to see when he's picking at the bottom of round 2 again. Um, and a guy like Trey Lance, I don't think is going to be there at the end of round 2, or he might not be there at round 2. So I think that kicker doesn't roll the dice and wait, and he drafts Trey Lance here at 1.112. Now, I watched film on all the top quarterbacks because as a Bears fan, I was hoping that one of these quarterbacks would fall to the Bears. And when I watched film on Trey Lance, from my perspective, he's a runner first and a quarterback second. In all the film that I watched, like
Kind of
it
like
seems
Lamar
like
Jackson.
kind of like a Lamar Jackson. He looks to run first. If there's no lane, then he'll actually, look to pass.
Right.
He's actually a pretty good passer, and I think that if he settles into the pocket more and runs when he needs to versus looking to run first, I think he can be really, really successful. But if he is in the mold of a guy like Lamar Jackson, Trey Lance can easily rack up a ton of fantasy points for you at the quarterback position.
Yeah, we've seen these Russian quarterbacks, and that holds a lot of fantasy value.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. And so I think a guy like Trey Lance, he may not be the best arm talent out of the groups of all the top QBs that went in this draft, but he's got the size to be able to absorb some hits in the NFL. Now, I don't know if he'll consistently be able to absorb them over the course of a full season, but given the lane, and if he's smart about sliding, getting out of bounds, and he really uses his legs,
Right.
He may end up being easily top 10, if not top 5 in points alone, just because of the running. So I think that's going to be intriguing, and that's going to be a reason why he's going to be taken, I think, at the end of the first round here.
He does have a May ADP of 2.3, and I know you don't have access to this information, but the owner of Kicker Liker, Brian Dalton, actually drafted Lamar Jackson as a rookie in the Mega Awesome Dynasty League. So similar, play styles there. Maybe we could see him take Trey Lance at the 112.
Yeah.
Now let's get into the second round at the 2.01. We're going back to the new owner, JLM.
Yep.
And you have...
Yeah, at 2.1, I've got JLM taking Michael Carter. I mean, you can make an argument for taking a guy like Michael Carter, who is in my book the top best available running back at that point. So if you were to flip it and have Michael Carter go earlier, I could totally see that. But I think that linebacker was a bigger need for JLM. So. Right. I look at it and I see running back's also a need for him. So he's going to take the best available here. Thankfully, in this mock, nobody else took a running back after he took that linebacker.
Right.
So I think that this is a good scenario for a guy like JLM who gets two top guys in positions of need for him.
Yeah, and his May ADP is actually the 112. So this is only one spot later. I like Michael Carter. I've said it 1,000 times. I don't think he's as talented as Javonte Williams. I think there's a reason why Javonte Williams went a lot higher than Michael Carter. But for value, I kind of see Michael Carter as the discount Javonte Williams. If you look at their production in college at North Carolina, it's very, very similar across the board. And when you're taking Javonte Williams, higher in the first round, but you can wait and get yourself Michael Carter in the second round, that's a good value to get somebody who may actually be just as good. Yeah. So I think that's a good call there for him at the 2.01. I would not actually be shocked also if he goes back to back linebackers at the 1-9 and the 2-1, just because that is a big team need for him. But he did actually trade away a running back, correct? Did he? I'm thinking he did. Maybe not.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that one.
But yeah, he could probably use another running back there. So now we are up at the 2.02.
Yeah, 2.2. You're back on the clock here. So you've solidified your running back and wide receiver positions. You took a quarterback. I think it makes sense for you to start looking linebacker. Looked at your team. You've got a couple good linebackers, but nothing wrong with grabbing another top tier linebacker. And a guy like Zaven Collins has really good size. I think he's 6'4", 6'5". He's a big boy. I think that he is going into a really good system for him. I think Arizona's defense is a very underrated defense, in my opinion. They've been doing things to make their defense stronger the last couple of years. And
right. Another first round linebacker
they
last
took
year.
Simmons last
Isaiah
year.
Simmons.
Yeah, took Simmons last year. Took Collins this year. Looking to really solidify that linebacker unit. They have a guy who's my favorite safety in the league, in Budda Baker, in the backfield. That's always going to ball hawk out there for him. And so I really like this defense. I think that the fit is great, and he's an intriguing player. And so if I were you, that's the guy that I would target there at that linebacker position at 2.2.
Yeah, and per Dynasty League Football, they have him ranked as the linebacker 4 in this draft class, behind a guy that we'll probably get to in a couple of picks here. But one stat here about Zaven Collins, and I've mentioned it before on another podcast, is that he did not commit a single penalty across 3 seasons. That's 2,042 snaps without a penalty.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Especially since he is a little bit of a coverage linebacker. And you would typically expect those guys in coverage to, be committing those pass interference penalties, and not a single one. So that's pretty impressive. We will get to back on the board with Iowa Patriots at the 2.03.
2.03, I've got Iowa Patriots taking running back here in Trey Sermon from San Francisco, I believe. And, doesn't have, he's another team that I look at and doesn't have a ton of real needs. So my perspective, if I'm him, I'm loading up on running back. Take a young running back where he might not need to start him right away, but if he can develop in a year or two. I believe Jeff Wilson's gone in San Francisco.
He's injured.
He's injured.
Yes. So I think he's going to miss the entire year.
Yeah. So San Francisco is a team that loves to give running backs a shot at the starting lineup to see if they pan out. So if this guy gets a shot and he ends up being good, he could stay as the lead back. So I think there's some pretty good value in taking him at the top of the second round for a guy who might end up being a long-term starter there.
Right. He does have a May ADP of 2.02. So this is only one spot later than that. And going back to the forced missed tackles thing that I've talked about with a couple of these other guys, he is actually tied with Javonte Williams for the most forced missed tackles in a single game, with 17 forced missed tackles in one game. So he's another guy that can make people miss in space. Let's go to the 2.04. This is me being back on the clock for 4 more straight picks from the 2.04 through the 2.07.
Yeah.
And the first of those picks is.
So again, the order doesn't matter here since you got the 4 picks. So, I just know that these are the 4 guys I'm giving you. The first guy is Jeremiah Owusu, who is considered one of the top linebackers here. So I've got you. Again, you only really need 2 stud running backs in this league. You've got them. After you've got your 2 what are, in my opinion, really good wide receivers. I think you really should start focusing on shoring up your linebacker core. So I've given you Zaven Collins, and I've given you Jeremiah Owusu, who I think are going to give you a really good tandem in young linebackers for you to build your defense over the long term.
Right. And, this team in this league is in a full rebuild. I chose to completely tear the team down and completely rebuild it last year. You mentioned my running back situation. I've got Jonathan Taylor from last year. You gave me Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, so I'm good there. You gave me a couple of wide receivers in Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith to pair, I think, with the only wide receiver I really have left, which is Curtis Samuel. And then I do have Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray from last year's draft class, and then pairing that with Zaven Collins and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, which is actually the linebacker 3 in this draft class that I was referencing a couple of picks ago, with Zaven Collins being the linebacker 4 in this draft class, based on those like 5 or 6 experts over there at Dynasty League Football that have them ranked. Let's move on to the 2.05 pick.
Yeah, 2.05 here. I've got you drafting another receiver. So you've got a couple, 3 really good receivers there. This guy is going to be your number 4, and Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU. Now, a lot of people have him ranked lower here. What I think he has going for him is he's coming out of a system in LSU that just cranks out unbelievably good wide receivers. I think at a different school, with less talented receivers, I think this guy would shine and be considered maybe a more highly rated prospect, where he'd be the go-to guy. He just happened to be a really good player amongst even better players in LSU, but the talent's there. I think that he is very underrated and will be a very productive receiver in this league. I don't think that if I'm you, I don't think I pass on this guy, especially in the middle of the second round.
Yeah, and he does have a May ADP of 110, so he should be kind of up there at the end of the first round. He is 6'2", 205. He's got that alpha size that we like in a wide receiver. He didn't drop a single pass in the red zone on 25 targets. He's being repaired with his coach from LSU and what is it, Joe Brady. And so I think if I was able to get Terrace Marshall at the 2.05, I think that would be a good value to get him there. Let's move on to the 2.06.
So 2.06, I got you going back to wide receiver. Again, we start 4 receivers. In my opinion, you want to have at least 4 really good receivers and start adding a little depth for bye weeks and for injuries. So I've got you taking another highly touted receiver in this draft in Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a depth pick for you. I don't know that this guy's necessarily starting, but I think having him on your bench as a potentially number 5 receiver, I think is really good. And if I'm in your shoes, that's a guy that I would look to possibly roster there.
Yeah, he does have a May ADP of 2.06, so it's right there, right at that pick. And that's without IDP in there. So we've had a couple of IDPs come off the board already. He was taken in the 4th round. I would have liked to have seen him maybe with that day 1 or day 2 draft capital, not falling to day 3, but he definitely has the opportunity for production there in Detroit, because if you look at that, wide receiver room in Detroit, it's just trash, right? It's just garbage. Yep. And so he definitely has the opportunity to carve out a role for himself in Detroit. Yep. And
late round picks don't mean or 3rd, 4th round receivers don't necessarily mean that they won't translate
right
in the NFL. two guys I can think of, and Darnell Mooney and Terry McLaurin are mid-round guys who have really solidified themselves into scary receivers.
Antonio Brown was a 6th rounder.
There you go.
All right. The 2.07. This is my final pick in the 2nd round.
Yeah. So looking at your team and the fact that you got to rebuild, I've already given you a ton of receivers. You've got more than enough running backs. You're solidified at the quarterback position. I don't know that tight end makes sense here. So I've got you taking the top safety, in my opinion, here in Richie Grant. The safeties you have are actually putting up pretty productive points, but this gets you young at the safety position. In my opinion, having an elite safety is important in this league. An elite safety could rack up significantly more points than an average safety in this league. So that's why I got you going Richie Grant here at 2.07.
Yeah. And, he was the 2nd safety drafted in the NFL draft behind Javon Holland by 4 picks. Javon Holland went to Miami. Richie Grant went to Atlanta. Atlanta is my favorite NFC team. So that could be possible. I kind of see Richie Grant in this draft class. And why is his name eluding me? I think, you drafted him. Who's the safety out of Carolina last year? I think you got him on your team, didn't you?
Safety out? No, I took Antoine Winfield last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You got Winfield. Who's the one out of Carolina?
Is that Delpit?
No, Delpit went to Cleveland. Why am I spacing on his name?
Yeah, his name eludes me too.
Oh, it is Jeremy Chin.
Chin, yeah, there you go.
Yes. I kind of see Richie Grant as this year's Jeremy Chin because I think he is kind of that box safety. He's the highest graded run defense safety in this league with a grade of 90 per PFF. I think it would be a stretch to see me take a safety in the 2nd round. It is important to have good safeties in this league, but I kind of see safeties as being replaceable. They're a dime a dozen. You can go into free agency pretty much any week of the season in our league and pick up a safety that you can start and get you 10 plus points, 15 points.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily agree with you. If you're looking for a safety that can get you potentially 20 or 30 points in a week, maybe not consistently, but they'll go off for 20, 30 points. I'm not sure that you're picking that guy up off the waiver wire. I think if you really want to have one of those top guys, you're probably going to have to spend, in my opinion, a 2nd or 3rd rounder to grab one of those guys.
Yeah, I agree. And I like Richie Grant. I probably see him more as a 3rd round pick, maybe even, I don't know if he'd slide to the 4th round, but, somewhere in that mid 3rd to late 3rd round area is kind of where I kind of see him going, but we'll see there. We can move on to the 2.08 with Das Raderhawk, and you have.
So I've got him taking Kenneth Gainwell here. He went wide receiver. I had him going wide receiver in the 1st round and Jalen Waddle. So for me, it makes sense for him to grab a running back here. Go wide receiver, running back. He is the top available running back on my board at this point. So for me, it seems like a no-brainer for Das to grab a running back here.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I really like Kenny Gainwell. I was deeply shocked to see him fall to the 5th round in the NFL draft. I don't know why he wasn't a day 1 or day 2 guy. I was really kind of confused to see that. We've seen him have a 2,000 yard from scrimmage season. The last time we basically saw him on the field, he had 2,000 yards from scrimmage. And in my running back grading system, he graded 6 out of 8, which I thought was really good. If he would have had a day 1 or day 2 draft capital, that would have gave him an elite comp. But sadly, he falls to day 3 in the 5th round. I still like Kenneth Gainwell. I think he is an upgrade in that offense over Boston Scott, if that's how they want to use him as the third down pass catching running back there in Philadelphia. But this is a stat that I find interesting. There have been 66 players, 5'11 plus, who weigh less than 201 pounds and ran a 4.4 plus. He actually ran a 4.52 in the 72nd percentile of the draft class. Out of those 66 players, the best player in that group is Justin Jackson. 0 have had any fantasy impact to this day. So that might be a red flag there with drafting somebody like a Kenny Gainwell, maybe at the end of the 2nd round. Despite all of that, I still like Kenny Gainwell. I still think he can be a good NFL running back. But if he is, he's going to be an outlier. He's going to be 1 out of 67 that have actually hit with that comp. So that's kind of interesting there. So we will move on to the 2.09 Sandusky victims back on the board.
Yeah, I got
He's got
Sandusky.
a couple of picks here at the end of the 2nd.
Yep. So I got him, grabbing one of the top remaining linebackers in Nick Bolton. Believe he's in Kansas City in a system where I think he'll get a chance to play pretty early. So, again, I tend to lean a lot of linebackers. I tend to lean linebackers in terms of valuing them high. So I think this pick makes sense for a guy like Sandusky just to shore up a team that I think is actually, pretty well rounded at this point.
Yeah, and he I think, what did he finish 2nd last year?
Yeah.
He kind of has a history of finishing 2nd every year. He's kind of always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Kansas City took Nick Bolton in about the same range as they drafted Willie Gay last year. We didn't get to see Willie Gay a lot, but we saw him a little bit there more towards the end of the year. And I think if you pair these two guys together, I think they can both be really, really good. Nick Bolton is linebacker 5, according to the 5 or 6 experts over there at dynastyleaguefootball.com. And I think Sandusky is in the position where he's looking for another linebacker right now. And let's move on to the 210. Das Raderhawk back on the clock again. And you have him taking...
I have him taking Kadarius Toney here, receiver out of New York. So I've got him taking a receiver that I think is going to crack the starting lineup pretty early on in New York. They invested a pretty high pick in him. I know that they value him a lot. A little bit of a smaller guy, but a speedster, and has really good hands. And given the opportunity, I think that he can do really well. New York has cranked out some pretty good receivers in the past. They value him pretty highly to take him in the 1st round. I think he's going to be given an opportunity to succeed. I think this pick for me makes sense to take here for Das.
Yeah, Kadarius Toney, he's basically the last of the 1st round draft capital wide receivers that we have on the board. It is interesting that, you had guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown who were drafted in the 4th round. You had guys like Terrace Marshall who were drafted in the 2nd round, going ahead of a 1st round wide receiver in Kadarius Toney. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to talent, right? And there's different reasons why players fall and slip on the draft board. Doesn't mean that they're not worthy of being drafted higher, but teams that are interested in these guys might have bigger needs at other roles, so they'll let a guy slide and then realize, hey, if he's still there in second, third, fourth round, I'm gonna go grab him. Yeah, I don't tend to pick in mock drafts similar to how they actually went down in the real draft, right? So if a guy's a first round receiver, I'm not necessarily going to put him in the first or second round automatically in a mock draft. Like a good example of that is a guy like Marquise Brown. I think he was taken as a first round receiver, if I remember correctly. I never liked him.
Right.
I thought he was small. Never really impressed me. Also, the system that he went to wasn't that good. And so, I wouldn't have drafted him in the first, 1, 2, 3 rounds, even though he was a first round receiver. But then you have guys who might be, second, third, fourth round receivers, have immense talent. And if I see something on film that I like, I'm not afraid to pull the trigger on them early. That's just kind of that's my mantra there.
Right. And Kadarius Toney does have a May ADP of 2.05. So getting him at the 210, 5 spots later would be a good value for Das Raiderhawk. Moving on to Sandusky Victims again at the 2.11. And you have him taking...
I have him taking a receiver in Rondale Moore. I just got him adding a little more depth here at the receiver position. I don't think you can go wrong adding depth here. I think, there's a lot of value there at the end of the second round to get a guy like Rondale Moore, put him on your team where you don't have to rely on him to start, but give him some time to develop. To me, it just makes sense.
Yeah, and Rondale Moore actually does have a May ADP of 2.1. So he's way, way up there at the beginning of the second round. So if he were to fall all the way down to the back half of the second round, which is quite possible because of all those picks that I have right there in the middle of the second round, could cause him to actually fall down to the late second if I don't take him there in that range. Yep. So that does make sense. Let's finish out the second round at the 212 with Kicker Liker again.
Kicker Liker, still not going to give him a kicker here as much as I really wanted to, but I'm giving him a receiver in Dwayne Eskridge. He already has a lot of receivers. When I look at his roster, he's got a ton of players at that position. But I think this player in Dwayne Eskridge gets him younger at the position, which I don't think you can go wrong with. He's got some guys that are, late 20s or hovering around 30 at the receiver position. So for me, this is more about thinking longer term with that position.
Right. And, we could possibly see Dwayne Eskridge within a couple of years, maybe take on that Tyler Lockett role or something like that. And with Kicker Liker coming off a championship last year, he doesn't have a lot of team needs. So for him to go at the 212 makes sense. Now, I will ask you, there was somebody that seemed kind of conspicuous by his absence on this list. And so I wanted to ask you about him specifically.
Oh, Elijah Moore?
And that is Elijah Moore.
Yeah. Yeah. So he felt he was a guy that a lot of people thought would go in the first round. I think he went in the top of the second round, right? He was one of the first.
Yeah, he went at the 2.02. Yes.
2.02. Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with Elijah. If somebody ended up taking him here, I think that would be fine. It's just when I look at him, I also want to. I think he's a pretty small guy too, right? If memory serves me correctly, he's what, 5'9"?
Yeah, he's 5'9", 178.
Yeah.
But also to be fair, Rondale Moore is only 5'7".
Yeah.
And 181. So, and even our precious Devontae Smith might be 6 foot, but he's only 170.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some smaller wide receivers in this draft class for sure. Elijah Moore does have a May ADP of 111. So he's right there at the back half of the first round where Sandusky picks in the first round. Elijah Moore has that 111 ADP. So yeah, I just found that interesting that he was off your list completely in the top 2 rounds, and that you would maybe have somebody like a Dwayne Eskridge going at 212 over Elijah Moore.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily hate Elijah Moore, and I don't necessarily think that he'll be a bad player or a bust. Just in my view, and watching a little bit of film on him, and believe me, I haven't had the need to go in depth on any of these players because I know that I'm not drafting any of them. So This has been a very weird year in that sense, in terms of how I scout players and watching film on them. But
sure,
but a guy like Elijah Moore, it just
so he is the same height as Dwayne Eskridge. They're both 5'9". Eskridge has about 12 pounds on him, which equates to a BMI of 2 higher, 28.1 for Dwayne Eskridge compared to the 26.3 BMI of Elijah Moore. They're both betas, so they're a little bit on the smaller side. But, Elijah Moore does have that 2.02 draft capital, where Dwayne Eskridge is at the end of the second round at the 224. So.
Yeah, I mean, if Elijah were to go, anywhere there in the second round, I wouldn't fault anybody from taking him. It's just from my perspective, I just wouldn't put him there. I think some of these guys that I put out, the other receivers that I have on this list, in my view, just happen to be a little bit better. It's not like they're blowing him out of the water. Again, I just wasn't impressed as much when I saw this guy, even though the draft capital is there at 2.02. I don't know. In my view, I don't know that it was worth. I think there's a reason that he slid too, right? A lot of teams chose not to take him in the first round. He slid, and then going into round 2, teams have some time to figure out who they want to pick, and trying to figure out players that fell. And who knows what happened there, if they thought, hey, if this guy was being touted as a first round receiver, we're going to take him at the top of the second. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't have him there.
And before we get out of here, I just wanted to quickly ask you about the 3 remaining quarterbacks. I've seen some mocks with the 3 of them, all 3 of them being in the second round. Maybe Xtreme doesn't fall that way again because of all the picks that I have there in the second round. But what are your thoughts on these 3 guys, starting with Justin Fields, going to your Chicago Bears?
Yeah, I really like Justin Fields. I think he's a high character guy. He's a dual threat guy. He's fast. So I think that he'll use his feet. He'll rack up some fantasy points there. I hope that he's finally the quarterback we've been missing in Chicago. I'm about as excited as I've ever been for a quarterback to be drafted in Chicago. And we'll see if he starts in this first year, and how the Bears choose to use him. I think once he does get a chance to play, I think he'll do really well. I think he'll be a very successful, I'm hoping, but I also do think, I do believe that he'll be a very successful quarterback in this league. And so from a fantasy perspective, yeah, I mean, I've seen rankings where he's right up there at the top, and I've seen him where he's closer to the bottom of the quarterbacks. Yeah, I think that when I compare him to somebody like a Trey Lance, I think that Trey Lance got more value because of the running ability. Justin Fields is going to probably be a little bit more of a pocket passer. So we'll see if that translates into decent fantasy points, or if that's going to put him a little bit lower in terms of fantasy points because he tends to be more in the pocket. So I do hope that he'll be a really good quarterback in this league.
Yeah, so a couple of notes on Justin Fields real quick is that he is the number one highest accurate pass percentage last season in this draft class. The most accurate passer in this draft class. He's also number two highest completion percentage on deep passes of 20 plus air yards of all FBS quarterbacks in 2020, with 59.4% behind only another guy I'm about to ask you about, Zach Wilson.
Zach Wilson. Yeah, I really like Zach Wilson too. He's not considered a mobile quarterback like some of these other guys, but his arm strength is amazing. When you look at, you've probably heard the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes with Zach Wilson. Now, Patrick Mahomes can run the ball. I don't know that Zach Wilson can run the ball the same way that Patrick Mahomes, but in terms of how hard they get that ball out and their mechanics it's just amazing. Also, in his pro day, put up some really impressive throws in terms of moving sideways, moving laterally, and throwing across his body. And
he might have had the single most impressive throw of all quarterbacks at the pro day.
Yeah. So his ability to get that ball out there and throw lasers. I do feel like Zach Wilson is going to be a really good quarterback in this league. I don't know that he would be, when it's all said and done, one of the top quarterbacks, but still very, very talented quarterback, and is going to do really, really well in this league, in my opinion.
So do you see Fields and Wilson coming off the board then in our round 3 in this league? Is that where you see them going, round 3?
Yeah, I think so. The other thing too is, so I've only got 2 quarterbacks here. When I look at our league, there isn't a ton of need at the quarterback position. It seems like most teams are, outside of, I feel like, kicker really needs to get a young, good QB just to have behind him. He's got Rodgers, right?
Yeah, the 2 teams with the biggest needs at quarterback in our league are Kicker Liker, who has pretty much only Aaron Rodgers on his roster right now. And that's got to be pretty scary for him if Rodgers just all of a sudden decides he's hanging it up because he doesn't want to come back to Green Bay. He's got Jameis Winston on his team. We'll see who wins that job in New Orleans. That's pretty much all he's got. Then if you look at the other team, Iowa Patriots, he has Andy Dalton, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Matt Ryan. Now, that's not a great situation to have either, because Andy Dalton coming into, again, to your Chicago Bears, but they drafted Justin Fields. They promised Andy Dalton the starting job when he signed there, but that was before they drafted Justin Fields. They could give him the first snap in the first game and be like, there, you started, and then bring in Justin Fields for the rest of the year. Garoppolo looks like he's been replaced. So right now, pretty much all he has on his team is Matt Ryan. So he does not have a 3rd round pick. He's only got that 110 and the 2-3, where you had him taking Micah Parsons and Trey Sermon. Maybe somewhere in that range, he kind of has to take somebody like a Justin Fields. Maybe he takes Justin Fields because he already has Andy Dalton. Maybe he takes Mac Jones because he's a Patriots fan. I know you're not a fan of Mac Jones, but
I hope he takes Mac Jones.
We can maybe see something like that happen. But yeah, those are the quarterback needy teams in our league. Before we get out of here and wrap this up, is there anything else you want to say about this draft class, about the league in general?
Yeah, I'm always amazed at the parity in this league. I think that we've got some pretty good owners and that draft really well. And this is a fun league because there's so many defensive positions that you have to think about and try to strategize in terms of how that's going to play into how to factor in a defensive player over an offensive player. So for me, that adds another layer of complexity to this. I think this is a good draft class. I think there's a ton of wide receiver talent here. Running backs, either teams are really devaluing running backs, or this draft class is pretty thin at running backs because
it's thin at running back. I mean, you've got three. You've got the big three: Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams. After that, it just falls off a cliff.
Yeah.
You've got Michael Carter and Trey Sermon, kind of in that next tier, and then after that, it really falls off a cliff.
Yep.
Then you're getting into your Kenny Gainwells, you're getting into your Chuba Hubbard, you're getting into I mean that's about it. I mean, maybe somebody like Ramondre Stevenson, but it's ugly. If you're not nailing one of these top 3 to 5 guys, it's just bad.
Yeah,
At the running back position.
I would agree.
Wide receiver position is pretty deep. I really liked this draft class pre-draft. I don't like it as much now that we've seen the draft. I think, and this is just my take, but I think this is the worst draft we've ever seen in the history of fantasy football in terms of landing spots for all of these guys. I just felt like everybody went to the worst possible place they could have gone, starting with Travis Etienne and Rashad Bateman.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see how it turns out. But
kind of crazy. You've got 9 picks in the first 2 rounds. It's a shame that you didn't have 9 picks last year, because I thought there was amazing talent last year that you missed out on.
I've been saying that meant, could you imagine if I had this all these picks last year?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be set.
Be in really, really good shape.
I'd be set, because now I'm a little scared. I'm a little skeptical about doing a rebuild with this draft class.
Yeah.
Because it just hasn't panned out how I kind of hoped it would. I have something like 17, I think, of the first 39 picks, which is just incredible. We'll probably never see anything like this again in this league.
I highly doubt it.
It took a lot of trading. I pretty much got rid of everybody. I don't have a whole lot left on my team. We'll see if it pays off for me. It's kind of like the line from Dodgeball, right? When he's like, "It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him."
There you go.
I don't know that it's going to pay off for me. I don't know if it would be fair to say that I kind of dominated in this league, I think, for about the first 7 seasons. But I had to. I saw my team getting old, and that's something you got to do in Dynasty. At some point, if your team is just looking old, you have to be honest about where your team's at. And I had just won 3rd place again in 2019. And I just looked at my roster and went, I could probably keep winning 3rd place for the next 5 years with this roster. But it's just getting old, and I need to do something about that. And I went soft rebuild last year, and I went full blown hard rebuild this year, and we'll see how that turns out. We'll see if it gets me back to where I was before then. In the other Dynasty League, Mega Awesome Dynasty League, I did a hard rebuild back in 2018, and I just won the championship in 2020. So it really only took me 2 seasons to go
Nice.
from rebuild to championship, and I didn't have half of these picks that I have now when I did that rebuild. So
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for this episode. You got anything else for us?
No, I'm good. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for giving me a chance to walk through what I'll say is a fairly honest mock draft from my perspective. No hiding some of my sleeper picks here in the first 2 rounds. So
Yeah, and that's an advantage that you have, I think, over all the other guests that I'm going to have on this podcast, is that they're all going to be kind of blowing smoke and hiding their picks. So it's not going to be as honest as yours is. I really liked your mock draft. I think you had some good value there for these owners. Give them something to think about when they watch this episode, about maybe what they should do with their picks. Stick around for just 1 second after we end this episode, and thanks for watching, and I will see you guys all next time.